honored by the Faculty Association would like to make a presentation on the budget. But before we go into that presentation, are there any members of the public who wish to address the board? Do we have any cards?
We have one member, Mr. Dan Haley.
Oh, yeah. I'm going to open the hearing, and I'll recognize Professor Haley.
Good evening. My name is Dan Haley. I'm one of the librarians here at Pasadena City College, and thank you very much for allowing me to speak here tonight. I'd like to address one part of the proposed budget, and it's the section in your packet dealing with Capital Outlay Fund number 41. Capital Outlay Fund is a little bit of a misnomer. This is not a capital projects fund. This money is the money that we've saved over the years by not expending all the money that we got in our general fund. And this has been put aside as kind of a rainy day fund. Right now there's $18 million in this fund. The proposed budget proposes to spend down $10 million of that amount. I look at the list of what those expenditures are for, and I see a lot of money going to construction firms, a lot of money going to software vendors. What I don't see is money going to students, especially in regard to class sections. And I remember that all of you have said that students are your #1 priority. And you've also said that you do anything to add more class sections. And I wish that you would please consider using at least some of these funds to add more class sections. Thank you very much.
Okay, we have no other public comment cards, so we will invite the Faculty Association to make a presentation on the budget.
Sorry, just 1 second to get this going.
If you could introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Danny Hammond. I'm a faculty member at CPC. I also serve as the Academic Senate representative on the Budget Resource Allocation Committee, and I am the co-lead negotiator for the Faculty Association. Thank you for your thankless work as PCC trustees. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Your decision affects the lives of hundreds of faculty and staff and tens of thousands of students. I am here on behalf of the Faculty Association. We want to share what we are being told about the financial condition of the college and show the conclusions we've reached based on the numbers provided by the district. If there are any inaccuracies in our presentation, we welcome the administration's input on setting the record straight. We are only interested in making sure the facts are known, so decisions made by this body can be fully informed and negotiations can be productive. We are always interested in reasonable and appropriate cost-saving measures. We are not opposed to appropriate prudence in these economic times, but any good thing taken to the extreme can become a bad thing. We need to remember that we are not a bank, we are an educational institution. We are not suggesting spending all of our reserves, although dipping into them during tough economic times to provide a few more classes is what reserves are for. However, the numbers indicate that without dipping into the reserves, we can afford another year similar to 2011-12, in which, in spite of the budget cuts from the state, we ended the year with a surplus of at least $1.8 million. And it included both a winter intersession and 578 more classes. The suggestion of a budget crisis has led to recent decisions by both the administration and the board that short-circuit the deliberative process known as shared governance and negotiations. Of particular importance is the attempt to change the calendar by eliminating winter intersession mid-year, essentially a missed opportunity for students and effectively a 6-week furlough for faculty. The faculty are at least as interested, if not more interested, than the administration and the board in the financial viability and stability of PCC. This is our livelihood, our careers. We have no interest in PCC failing financially. More importantly, we love teaching and we love the students we work with here at PCC. Finally, faculty tenure tends to be much longer than administrators and board members. We are reasonable people. We are willing to do whatever it takes to make sure PCC is the best educational institution it can be, as well as fiscally viable and stable. The fundamental problem seems to be a difference in what we believe the facts to be and the state of PCC's financial status. This is affecting decisions made by the administration, the board, and negotiations. We have made similar presentations to the administration through the shared governance process and negotiations, and we have received no explanations as to why these numbers or conclusions are wrong. There are two distinctly different narratives being told. On the one hand, in February of this year, the board was told, and a letter was sent out to the PCC community, which read in part, fair warning and full disclosure. If you are hoping against hope that PCC can solve its current budget crisis and yet preserve the status quo, this is going to be a difficult message for you. Can we end our budget crisis without making difficult choices, and soon? No. Can we end our budget crisis without the end of business as usual? No. And later in that same letter it read, but to make matters worse, this is now the 5th consecutive year that our annual operating expenses and enrollment have significantly exceeded our annual funding from the state. We have not balanced our expenses on current revenues since Dr. Costa retired in 2007. At that time, we did have some savings. Today, we have spent almost all of it. And as recently as 1 month ago, the BRAC committee was told by the administration that our expenditures were approximately $120 million a year, and our expected revenues for 2012-13 were about $105 million, leaving us with about a $15 million deficit. Along with this came a proposal of possible ways to bridge this gap, which included, among other things, furloughs for non-faculty, the elimination of winter intersession, which is effectively a furlough for faculty for 6 weeks, which at the time the administration said they must negotiate with the FA. If this narrative is true, we don't understand why the administration would recommend and the board would approve the hiring of 30 new employees, the expenditure of $8.5 million moving people out of the U building, that's $2.3 million over the budget, a building that in the spring of 2011 the administration declared unsafe and determined had to be evacuated by August 2011, in part based on studies as old as December 2007. That study, by the way, found 3 other buildings with the same Category 5 risk factor, Building C, Building R, and Building E, and 2 other buildings with worse risk factors, the Sexton Auditorium and the W building. Yet students were using this unsafe facility as recently as 2 weeks ago, 1 year after the self-imposed deadline of August 2011. And today I was in that building because our faculty association offices are still there. The cost of this unnecessary project, $8.5 million, would fund 1,700 sections. That's over 6 winter intersessions. The overrun on this alone, $2.3 million, would fund 460 sessions, about 2 winter intersessions. On the other hand, the numbers tell us a different narrative. According to our year-end operating statement and financial status report, we have been living well within our means. This is a chart of our year-end transfers. It's a spreadsheet with the year-end sweeps for the past 5 years. It demonstrates that our revenues have exceeded our expenditures. Let me just get my pointer here so I can point out a couple things. Resulting in surpluses on average over the last 4 years of about $5.5 million. The surplus is 2007-8, the dark number at the bottom. Some of it goes to other outgoes, some of it is an increase in revenues. But you can see for this year it's 1.8 million, last year it was almost 5 million, et cetera, et cetera. The average is about 5.5 million over the last 4 years, every year. that we have had revenues more than expenditures. Yet we are told the operating expenses have exceeded our state funding since 2007. It demonstrates that our general reserves or savings as of June 30, 2012 is about $20.7 million. That's this number right over here. We had $18.9 million. We added $1.8 million this year, a 10% increase in reserves, and it's about an 18% of our budget. The state requires 3 to 5%. Again, I'm not suggesting we go down to those numbers at all, but I'm just saying that there's money there for some more classes. I have presented these numbers in the BRAC committee, and there has been no disagreement as to the veracity of these numbers. But again, if there are any inaccuracies in our presentation, we welcome the administration's input on setting the record straight. We are only interested in making sure the facts are known so that decisions made by this body can be fully informed and negotiations can be productive. We believe we have made adjustments and taken cost-cutting measures over the past few years in light of the state budget problems. The fact that we ended 2011-12 with a $1.8 million surplus is evidence of this. Among other things, the Faculty Association negotiated an early retirement incentive that has resulted in the bottom line savings to our annual expenditures in excess of $10 million a year. This is a copy of our quarterly financial status report. This is the year-end one for 2011-12. It's a very important document. On the second page, and the most important part of this document, in my opinion at this point, on page 2 of this document is a question that reads, does the district have significant fiscal problems that must be addressed? This year, no, the answer. Next year, no. The next page shows the signatures of our Chief Business Officer and our CEO, verifying that this is their statement. But we are told there is a budget crisis requiring difficult choices and the end of business as usual. Yet this document says that the district does not have any fiscal problems that must be addressed. All right, you can't read this one. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get this one up, but let's see. This is the annual operating budget. There we go. The 2011-12 year-end operating statement. Some key facts I just want to point out on here. Our budgeted expenditures, the expenditures is the bottom half down here. And at the top, I just want to point out, there's an adopted budget, and then we get to actuals. I'm going to stress the actuals, but I just want to mention our budget here. So our expenditures, our budgeted expenditures were $16 million. Our actual, that's this column here, were $10.4 million. $110.4 million. So we budgeted 116. We actually spent 110.4. That's $5.6 million under budget. Okay. We also received. Again, I'm sorry the heading isn't all the way on here, but up at the top you can see actual to date what we received was $112.2 million. So if you take the $112.2 million that we received, we spent $110.4, that left us with $1.8 million in surplus, and at the bottom, I know it's very hard to read, but that's $20.7 million in general reserves as a result, as of June 30th. See, I gotta go back. Sorry, I gotta get back to my presentation here. I use this computer all the time. This is a document, this is a 2012-13 budget in tonight's board packet. Some key facts to note. The expected revenues for this year are $109.5 million, and our budgeted expenditures of $111.4 million. That's $1 million more that we will expend this year than we spent last year. And yet, we are cutting 578 sections. We're hiring 30 new employees. We're cutting winter intercession. We're short-circuiting both shared governance and the negotiating process. Yet we're spending $1 million more this year than we actually spent last year. This is the difference between a budget and your actual expenditures. So this brings me to a summary of what we've discussed. So these are the numbers straight off the operating budget, where we have a total expenditures of $110.4 million. We have total actual receipts of $112.2. I believe we got another 2.4 since then. Is that right? You know?
Yes, I think.
Yeah, we did. We got another 2.4, and then there's another 2.9 that's being deferred. So we're only being deferred a total of 2.9 for last year. So that left us with this total surplus of 1.8. Okay. So since then, or in the interim, as the due to the quote-unquote budget crisis, the administration has suggested cost-saving measures, some of which have already been implemented, in the amount of about $6 million. This was in a document in the board packet 829, page 33. You can see the total amount. I don't want to get into all the details, but it included the cutting of sections and some reassigned time savings, vacant positions, etc. I think you all saw that in the board packet. If you subtract that from the actual expenditures, so here's our actual expenditures from last year, $110.4 million. You subtract the cost savings that have, some of which have already been implemented by the college. Then the total expenditures for 212-213, without any other changes, that means with an intercession and with the not the 578 sections, but with the intercession, you would have total expenditures of $104.5 million. We have revenues, as I just showed you, expected revenues of $109.5. That leaves a surplus of $5.1 million for next year. This does not include the expected savings of $589,000, which is really only 0.5% of our budget, if intercession is cut. There are a variety of other cost savings measures that I haven't calculated into here, but they include the savings on CERP for people that have retired. The ones that retired in December, we only realized half of their savings last year for the last half of the year, and the people that retired in June, we didn't realize any of those savings in last year's budget. In addition, we were told we would save $750,000 by the LED lights that were put in. My next question is, what if the Prop 30 does pass? That's another $6.7 million to PCC that could be used for classes. In conclusion, the narrative told by the numbers indicates we don't have a budget problem. However, we are always interested in reasonable improvements and efficiencies and taking appropriate cost-saving measures, as long as the primary goal is in the best interest of the students, pedagogically sound educational practices, and as long as faculty, staff, and students are fully involved in the process. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Professor Hammond. Before we go to the next presentation, is there any other, do trustees have any questions or points of clarification they'd like to ask Professor Hammond? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'd like to call on Renee Graves with Vicente Lloyd and Stutzman also to address the board.
And you have the best working air conditioner over there in the corner. So. Maybe in the hot